Hey, everybody, welcome into Proline TV. I'm Tony Mejia from PlaybookSports.com, joined by Andy Iskoe, owner of TheLogicalApproach.com. And we are going to be talking about the AL offseason, breaking down the hot stove happenings, and looking at win totals. This is not your official preview of what we anticipate transpiring in the American League, but it is a look ahead of sorts as pitchers and catchers have already reported, and spring training right around the corner in Florida and Arizona. Andy, the American League obviously saw the New York Yankees rise again, but only to be smacked down by the Dodgers in the World Series. And it looks to be wide open this season. The Astros are the favorite in the AL West, but that's wide open. The Yankees are the favorite in the AL East. I think that's wide open. And the Minnesota Twins are your favorite in a very, very competitive AL Central. So unlike the National League, where the Dodgers are the prohibited favorite, and we have co-favorites in the NL East, and the NL Central has the Cubs as a favorite, the AL more wide open. Please make sure that you are aware that the NL Hot Stove preview is out there, so keep an eye out for that and tune in and like and subscribe and all of that good stuff. But yeah, this is the AL. What stands out to you most in the American League, Andy?
Well, a couple of moves that the Astros made that seem to weaken that team, and who knows what their rotation is going to be as far as veterans towards the end of their career. The Yankees, well, a lot of it comes down to their rotation. I mean, if Max Fried is the pitcher that we saw a number of years ago in Atlanta, it's a nice one too with Fried and Cole. Boston, of course, made some news the other day, getting one of the moves, getting Bregman. Which strengthens. Although I'm not all that thrilled with the lineup on the Red Sox overall, and now we've got Rafael Devers, who apparently is balking at being asked to be the DH.
Get to second base, Bregman.
Yeah,
third base is mine.
Yeah, it's already starting with dissension in. I won't say in the locker room, but maybe between players and manager or whatever. So that's not an unusual thing. Houston, I can understand being the favorite in the West. But maybe the gap has closed a little bit this year. Not quite sure. I think I don't know if they have. Well, it wouldn't matter because if they had American League versus National League current odds to win the World Series, National League would be a very solid favorite. But I also think the National League is a deeper league than the American League as far as overall talent is concerned.
Oh, I'm with you there. I mean, I think you're looking at three legitimate playoff teams in the National League East and National League West, and then whoever gets out of the AL, the NL Central. And then in the American League, I could see anybody winning all three of those divisions. So,
well, the only one I could see in the American League Central, anyone but the White Sox. I think you can make a case for any of the other.
Oh yeah, I'm just I'm just saying. Outside of the bottom feeders in each of those divisions, I could see anybody winning in either of those things. But we'll talk about that.
When we get to the American League West, Oakland is going to be an interesting situation because as bad as they were last year, they did have little stretches of flashes of what we might expect in Las Vegas in a few years, but that's a few years down the road. But that'll be interesting because I think top to bottom, the AL West is the weakest of the three divisions, top to bottom.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about the AL West and the A's and their relocation situation when we get to them. We'll start in the AL East, though, where the Yankees come off a 94-68 season and are plus 110, according to DraftKings, to win the American League. They are a team that obviously lost the biggest prize of the 2024 offseason with Juan Soto defecting from the Bronx to Queens.
By the way, you said they were what, plus
110
to win the pennant or the division?
To win the AL East.
Okay, because I thought you said the American League, but that's okay.
No, American League.
They're still pretty solid favorites at plus 300 because I have them at even. That's why I thought that you meant the division.
The plus 300 to win the AL. Okay, but so you have them at even, plus 110 at DraftKings, 91.5 projected win total for, again, a team that won a little bit more than that last season. But obviously lose Juan Soto from the lineup. And losing Soto is just it's not a crippling blow, but it's a damaging blow because you had a guy that seemed to have very good chemistry with Aaron Judge. I know that once free agency began, it was a little bit alarming to us Yankees fans that Judge divulged that he hadn't spoken to Soto in the offseason. So I don't know what recruiting pitch was done there. And certainly the Latin influence in Queens in that Mets clubhouse, I think had a little bit to do with Soto opting to sign there. The offers that he got were very
we have
similar.
to believe that there will be some regression from Aaron Judge because of the absence of Soto. The question is just how much.
Yeah, and one thing that we've seen from Aaron Judge over the last few years is his plate discipline has done a complete 180. He's such a disciplined hitter, and has really done well. Still strikes out, but has cut that down. And now, I guess protecting him in the lineup will be Cody Bellinger, because that is who the Yankees rebounded with. I saw that Aaron Boone is still deciphering who his leadoff hitter is going to be. Josh Chisholm, I guess, stands out, but I don't know if he's as disciplined as they need him to be that leadoff hitter. I mean, certainly Anthony Volpe can get a chance, but he kind of regressed at the plate. And so the Yankees lose Juan Soto. You add Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt in for Anthony Rizzo. But you got Volpe back, Chisholm back. DJ LeMahieu was a candidate to lead off. He had a down season last year.
I'll tell you what, I think a big departure for the Yankees is Gleyber Torres.
Absolutely huge. Joined the Tigers. I'm a really big Gleyber fan, but I mean, Yankees fans really soured on Gleyber because he was all or nothing there for a while, trying to do too much at the plate. I really think he felt the pressure of being a free agent. Wish him all the best in Detroit, and certainly he got paid. You got the X factors in New York this season are the guys that were viewed as can't miss prospects that you really need to put it together this year, and that's Jason Dominguez and Osvaldo Cabrera. I think those guys will be X factors. Austin Wells is back behind the plate with two young catchers behind him. We'll see if either Jesus Rodriguez or J.C. Escara become household names in New York City. You mentioned that the top two in the Yankees rotation are going to be Garrett Cole and Max Fried. We also have Carlos Rodon looking for a bounce back season. Clark Schmidt is back, and some other options.
Luis Gil.
Luis Gil, rookie of the year, absolutely. So there's your projected top five if those guys.
Which, by the way, healthy. It's already causing a little dissension down there.
Of Marcus Stroman.
Marcus Stroman, right?
Absolutely. And
plus, he's a New York kid. He grew up there, and he
he's a Mets. In that regard, I don't mind the competitive spirit of Stroman saying, "I'm a starter. I'm a starter. I'm a starter," until you're not a starter, and then you got to play ball and be a team player. So we shall see what happens with New York. Obviously, the bullpen always a big deal. Last year, I think that was a major factor in that midseason swoon that the Yankees had. Just couldn't hold leads. We'll see what happens this season with Luke Weaver again, looking like the closer. So, what are your prevailing sentiments regarding the New York Yankees as they gear up for another run at an American League pennant?
Well, let me go through the season win totals, since this is a little bit different than we hadn't mentioned it in this one so far. We did in the National League. Circa has, I have the Circa numbers here, and they have three alternatives. They have the standard number that DraftKings and a lot of people have within usually 1.5 wins. But you can also go, if you're optimistic, over a higher number if you're really optimistic about a team, or you can go, or you play under it with a huge vig on that, or you can go under a very low number. I'll just give you an example. I mentioned the Athletics. Okay, the Athletics standard number is 72. They use a 5.5 or 6. It's a little bit different here. It shows 77.5 as the higher number. It shows 65.5 as the lower number. So in any event,
basically a ceiling and a basement to get you additional, get you paid a little more.
And I think if I mentioned it in the first, I believe that a 6-game swing represents about 4% of the season. So it's a very small margin that you're going over. It's not like in the NFL where a 6.5 win team could become a 10.5 win team if you're really strong on it, because it's only 4 games out of 17. Here for a team, the equivalent of going 6.5 to 10.5 might be something along the lines of improving by like 20 games or something like that, which is very difficult, but it does present that opportunity. In any event, the In the American League, the Baltimore Orioles are at 88. The Boston Red Sox are at 85.5. The The New York Yankees are at 92.5. The Toronto Blue Jays are at 78.5. And who am I leaving out in that division?
You're leaving out who am I thinking of?
Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, the Rays.
Yeah, they are at
Just north of
81.
me, or south of
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean, look, similar numbers at DraftKings, 91.5 for the Yanks, 87.5 is it for Baltimore? 87.5,
Yeah, we have
86.5 for Boston. So you have 85.5 for them.
right.
And then you got Toronto and Tampa Bay, 81.5 for the Rays and 78.5 for the Jays. And the Jays made some splashes. We'll talk about them in a second. But just your thoughts on the Yankees. Obviously, they really need a bounce back season from Goldschmidt and Bellinger to have to be the guy that he was, at least in Chicago, because the guy that fell off a cliff late in his stint with the Dodgers after putting up MVP type numbers just won't cut it in the Bronx. And then you throw in the Boo Birds. There's pressure immediately for him to perform.
Well, the couple of thoughts that I have, do the combination of Bellinger and who were we talking there about the other acquisition? Goldie and Bellinger. How do they come close to a Juan Soto? Probably, if they could get 85% of that production out of those two players, even though you're talking about two players instead of replacing one person in the lineup, that might be. It could be asking a lot because Soto was just so good. But we also mentioned about. Yeah, we also mentioned about the impact on Judge of losing Soto. I'm not sure that Goldie or Bellinger could make up for what Judge would lose by having a guy like Soto for protection. So that's a little bit of a negative. But on the other hand, when you look at the rotation, I'm going to say that the acquisition of Fried, if Fried is the Fried that we saw a good part of the time in Atlanta, is more than offsets the departure of Nestor Cortez.
Right.
So I would say that that's a little stronger. But also, you talk about a guy like Clay Holmes, who we talked about in the National League, who's left the Yankees. That could weaken the bullpen somewhat. Although Holmes was a spot starter, but he's still, and I think he's going to be used that way.
Served in the bullpen mostly.
Yeah, but that could also be a little bit of a weakened factor. Now they won 94 last year. That was 3 more than Baltimore won. And we'll see what our thoughts are on Baltimore, considering some of what they lost in the offseason. Again, this is just a preliminary review or preview of where we're going to be probably a month from now when we do our official American League and National League previews. 92.5. I'm still inclined to go over because I'm not all that high on the Red Sox and the Blue Jays in the division. And Tampa Bay's always a wild card because this is such a I'm going to say managed, but it's a really well-organized team. The organizational structure in Tampa Bay they may have done more with less than most other teams in the league over a period of, since they really became a player in the late 2000s.
Yeah, and they've lost some key arms over those years.
Through this period,
Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow both cut their teeth there. But yeah, we'll talk about the Rays. A lot of parity in here in the AL. So I'm inclined I'm not a pessimist, but as a Yankees fan, I'm not exactly optimistic that they will light the division on fire. I don't think they'll fall off a cliff. However, if Goldschmidt and Bellinger do struggle, I think that lineup will absolutely struggle. The Orioles are a team that I think everybody anticipated entering the 2024 season would overtake the Yankees just because of the sheer young talent all coming together. And, they were right there with the Yankees at the All-Star break.
And questions about the Yankee rotation going into last year.
Yeah. Oh, no.
We didn't know what Gil was going to do. We didn't know if Cortez was going to be able to have.
Absolutely. And then you had Corbin Burns, who up until he hit that swoon was excellent for the Orioles. I think he was the American League All-Star game starter. Yeah. If he wasn't, he was in that mix. And then, I mean, look, the Orioles weren't terrible. They went 91-71. But now what we see from Baltimore, losing Burns to the Diamondbacks.
They lost a lot from that roster from last year.
Absolutely. It's scrambling to have a lot of these young kids, really hit the ground running in 2025. Not just Gunnar Henderson, and Adley Rushman, but the likes of Heston Kirkstad and Jackson Holiday, all those guys now the pressure ramps up on them. Jordan Westberg, and at the top of the rotation, I believe the ace is going to be Grayson Rodriguez, based on what we've seen from a talent standpoint. They got Kate Povich, who they also view highly. Kyle Bradish had some injury concerns, so their young guys really have to step up.
What about Zach Eflin? Is he still?
They got.
No.
I'm just talking about the younger arms. But
Oh, okay.
More veteran arms. You got Zach Eflin, and you had Charlie Morton to the
Charlie
mix.
Morton, yeah.
Yep. So
who's been one of the more underrated, consistent starters in the latter stages of his career.
In latter stages of his career, and brand new scenery, brand new. I mean, from pitching all those years in the NL to now going back to the AL. Very interesting to see what he does. They added Gary Sanchez as a big bat. Probably you'll do DHing and supplant Rushman here and there. But you got, again, I mentioned all these young kids, Kerstad, Colton Cowser, and two additions that they have in that outfield. Ramon Laureano, who's an X factor because a few years ago, he looked like a very productive bat. He's had issues with contact. And then you've got Dylan Carlson, coming over from St. Louis, another guy who couldn't really cement his spot with the Cardinals. Jorge Mateo will be in the mix. He's been good for them. Ryan Mountcastle, Westbrook. I mean, so still a ton of talent, but a lot of question marks. And so let's look at the projected win total. I know you've got your circa numbers. The DraftKings number I'm looking at is 87.5. And again, as I mentioned last season, I believe it was 88 and
88 at circa, yeah.
No, pardon me, 91 and 71 for Baltimore last year. Yeah. So
their win total is 88 at circa, so very close.
So right in that ballpark. So yeah, odds makers downgrading them a few wins.
Yeah, and I'm going back over the last few years for the Orioles, and of course they had that great season in 2023 when they won 90-something games, or I think close to 100 back then. And then, of course, but they also showed some tremendous improvement. But they've been a 500 or better club for the last 3 seasons now, including 90 wins there a couple of times. So the talent is still there, and some of that young talent is now reaching, the maturity part of their careers. Their late 20s into the early 30s. So 88, it's hard. I just have concerns about that rotation.
Right. And I do like Rodriguez. I mean, again, it's a team that maybe with a little less pressure on them, maybe steps up because they do have a little bit more experience. I'll tell you what, though, odds makers anticipate that the Boston Red Sox will rejoin the fray. And we'll talk about Tampa and Toronto, who also have aspirations of getting back to where they were in what could be a loaded division if everybody plays well. Red Sox went 81 and 81 last season, which was actually probably better than a lot of people anticipated, especially when the injuries hit. They lost Tyler O'Neill there for a little while. Trevor Story, who they anticipated being a big bat and actually got off to a great start, he got hurt and was lost for most of the season. You saw the rise of Jarren Duran becoming the guy that many people envisioned him becoming, and Rafael Devers, who was a mainstay all year long. So you got an 81 and 81 Red Sox team now set with a win total at 86.5 at DraftKings. So odds makers certainly envision Boston taking another step forward under Alex Cora.
Well, and to keep in mind that the Red Sox, 4 of the last 5 years have been, prior to last year when they were 81-81, 3 of the 4 previous years they were under 500. So, this is a team that was basically, you could argue that along with the Giants, the team for the first 20 years of the millennium with the World Series championships that those 2 franchises have won, and they've been on hard times. And of course, I still haven't understood why they traded away Mookie Betts. I mean,
no, nobody
that
does.
Seemed to mark, a continuation of the decline that they had.
I heard the comparison, which was great because I didn't even think about it, that the Los Angeles teams always seem to get these monster deals that nobody gets. So you get, LeBron obviously was a free agent signing, but you get the Anthony Davis trade, and now you get Luka Doncic in there. And the comparison I heard was the closest thing to Luka Doncic joining the Lakers was Mookie Betts joining the Dodgers.
Yeah. is equally as head scratching. But I look at the rotation for well, and again, you mentioned Walker Bueller before. He's listed right
Mhm.
now, at least in this publication, the number 2 starter behind Crochet, who also is coming over and had a really good season with a terrible team, the White Sox. So some new blood in there. Tanner Houck, I think, had a more surprising season than a lot of people expected out of him last year, given what he had done previously. I'm thinking back to his Washington days. Brian Bello, Cutter Crawford is a nice mix of the rotation. I don't know that there's any outstanding pitchers there. We've seen Walker Bueller at his best, but then he missed all that time with the injury, and he hasn't really recovered. He did pitch well in the postseason last year, which could be encouraging at least. And Crochet, let's see if he can repeat what he did last year, and maybe that is part of the reason for the optimism. We never, Chris Sale never was, because of his injuries, never really was able to show with
Right.
Boston what he was capable of, what they expect. Another White Sox pitcher, by the way, who came over in addition to Crochet. So I can understand the optimism. I'm not all thrilled with the lineup, however, as far as what's in there. You got Devers, who had a great season, but I'm not sure. Yoshida, I guess, is another one that you can count on. But overall, these are a lot of new, different names that we're going to get used to, and a lot of them have to show that they can produce consistently.
Yeah, look, ceiling is high. There's no
Yeah,
question about that. If they can get the Bregman Devers thing ironed out, where Devers is somewhat satisfied, at least DHing some, because I think I do agree with management that Bregman's a better defensive third
yeah.
baseman, but
I
obviously
forgot to mention him. Yeah,
you want your superstar happy. So if he wants
yeah,
to stay at third base, you keep him at third base. But then Bregman's got to have an everyday spot in the lineup, so you put him at second. David Hamilton did a nice job last
yeah,
year. You got Trevor Story coming back, and Story, if he can stay healthy, man, he can continue to be productive. Tristan Cassis played first and did a nice job until he got injured. You mentioned Yoshida. Jarren Duran at the top of that order, one of the better, most productive leadoff hitters in baseball. You got Willie Abreu too. So ceiling is high. Again, mentioned Crochet, and I think the big bonus in being able to win the Crochet sweepstakes is the Yankees really wanted him.
yeah.
So
They settled for Max Fried, I guess.
Right, that's exactly
You
right.
got the experience, but I think right now, if you're looking 2-3 years down the road, I'd rather have Crochet.
Absolutely, and
he's a lefty.
If he stays healthy, a lefty that basically throws 100 and can blow you away, that's not going to go away. So certainly reasons for optimism in Boston, especially after a few down seasons.
Of course, Fried is also a lefty, so there's a little
offset
there.
I think the difference is Fried's more polished. He's more of a proven product, but he's also coming off a few injury concerns. Let's go to Toronto. Where the Jays, their big move this offseason was adding Anthony Santander. I thought was a key. You weaken a division rival, with another big bat. They're hoping Alejandro Kirk, who's a really nice hitter, had a down year last year. He'll be able to bounce back. Vlad Jr. Was a monster last year. Bo Bichette is back. George Springer's back. He was, hitter there. And they brought up some guys mid-season with the pressure off that really seemed to add to their arsenal. You have Addison Barger, Davis Schneider. He had some big hits last year. So Ernie Clement. So you've got some talent there. The rotation. Again, Gossman and Berrios are back as the 1-2. They've added Max Scherzer. We'll see if he can stay healthy enough to be Mad Max, or if he's back on the downside of his career, and that becomes glaring. And the big, huge X factor, Alek Manoah, former All-Star, who fell off a cliff. Had to get sent down to spring training to the minors, I should say, just to find himself. He was down in the Tampa Bay area for a while. Dunedin, and now he's back. So you got a Jays team. John Schneider, polarizing figure among that fan base too. I think if they get off to a slow start, he's a gunner. But certainly there's potential for them to be a surprise. I would not pick them to win the division, but coming off a season where they were down under 500 for most of the way. That projected win total of 78.5, if there is a significant improvement, could be surpassed from a team that went 74-88 last season.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with basically all that you said. I was going to mention that I tend to be optimistic about them. This was again, my numbers that I'm looking at go back 5 years. Last year was their first losing season in the last 5. They had always been over 500, at least going back to the COVID year of 2020 and each year since then. So asking them to not even get the 500, which is something that they've done, and they still have some nice bats in that lineup, and some arguably, we don't know how good a guy like Scherzer is going to be, but he does give you that veteran presence and all that, which could help with the younger pitchers. I'd have to think that Toronto has a better than a 53-47 chance of exceeding that season win total. So, I don't know that they could get much above 500, but I certainly think 500 is a reasonable goal.
Right, and I think it goes in line with what we expect out of the rest of the division. Does Boston take that step forward that is anticipated? Do the Yankees fall back some? Do the Orioles, stay in that 86-88 win range, or do they win 91 like they did last season? And then you've got the Tampa Bay Rays, also an X factor. Kevin Cash, I think most people would agree he gets the most out of his talent base.
Yeah.
Certainly was innovative in terms of using the opener before most people. And they got Shane McClanahan back off of an injury. A lot hinges on his return to health and being.
By the way, talking about using the opener, I seem to remember back in the early 1990s, when I was just about the time that I got here in 91, that Tony La Russa used to use something like that with Oakland, where he'd have a pitcher go 3 innings, and then another pitcher go 3 innings, and another pitcher go 3 innings. And for a while, they didn't put up any money lines on the Oakland A's because of that unique style.
Right. And it was unique back then.
Yeah, and what I would go a little bit further. I forget the number of pitchers you're allowed on the rosters at 13, I think. I'm not quite sure what the number is, but I would not be all averse to having sets where you have pitchers go 1 through 9 through the lineup, and you never see the same pitcher twice. And so, that might mean that you have to use 5 pitchers in a given day to do that, or maybe you let him go, maybe you let him face 12 hitters or something, so that you don't really get it, because the numbers are clear that when lineups see a pitcher for the 3rd time, there's a significant increase in their success as opposed to the first 2. So the way the game is managed now, with starting pitchers even becoming less and less of a factor, certainly in handicapping, why not just go to the extreme and say we are going to limit it, as much as we can, and give as few batters an opportunity to see multiple at bats against specific pitchers.
And a lot of this hinges on how does this Tampa Bay Rays team look in spring training, because a lot of these arms, especially in the bullpen arm for a team that uses openers and uses its bullpen the way it does, kind of unknown. And look, in the past, we've seen guys like Spencer Strider step up in spring training and become, just hit the ground running. Do the Rays have that?
We saw that with Cortez a few years ago with the Yankees.
Absolutely.
He won the rotation. He just won a spot after his performance in spring training, where he was striking everybody out.
And what we want to see McClanahan, whether he's looking healthy. Taj Bradley, whether he can take a step forward, because he's got the talent to do really well. Ryan Pepio is another guy who's an X factor. They got Shane Baz, who was considered one of their top prospects, also dealt with arm trouble. Zach Littell was a guy that had a really nice start coming over from the Phillies, and then had some issues in the second half of the season. So, there's talent in that rotation, but we got to take the wait and see approach here. From what DraftKings has is 81.5 on their win total. Are they a better than 500 team, a sub 500 team? Christopher Morel is back, and no Randy Arozarena this season. So that's
a loss
to that lineup.
Yeah,
because he's been a fixture there for so long. I guess Yandy Diaz becomes your primary catalyst in that lineup. They have Josh Lowe, no Brandon Lau anymore. So a lot of wait and see things for Kevin Cash and the Rays. And I think on paper, to me, they're the worst team in the division, but
Yeah.
with an asterisk because you could see them overtake
Yeah,
any of those teams.
their
except the
win
Yankees
total
or-
is 81, and I think that's about
Mhm.
right. I think that's probably their ceiling, and because if their ceiling, if I were going to play it either way, I would probably look under, because I said I wasn't all that crazy about Toronto, but I'm reserving my opinion on that, just like I am with most of the teams in that division. I don't have. There's nothing that I'm really all that sold on right now, even the Yankees, because I want to see how these teams that are many of these teams are significantly different. Let's see how spring training unfolds.
And I mentioned that Brandon Lau wasn't there, but he is. But obviously, they took the huge hit with Wander getting busted for the issue in the Dominican Republic. I mean, that was one of the better young.
I don't think we're going to see him again.
I don't think we'll see Wander Franco again. I mean, well, if you want to chip in and call him in the Dominican Republic, we can chat with him in his cell. But that's about that's about where he's going to be. But yeah, look, this is a team that has a tendency to develop young talent. So again, it's got to take the wait and see approach, and one of the teams that you have to monitor in spring training. But on paper, I think the Orioles and Yankees neck and neck. Red Sox, I buy them slightly more than the Blue Jays. But all four of those teams, if you want to tell me in September that they have the division lead, I'll believe you. Rays, a little more dubious on them.
Well, let me see. What did we? I don't know if we talked about the division odds for these teams.
We did plus 110 for the Yankees as
oh, that's favorite. Right. Right. I said even money on that one.
Yeah.
And no, I think that's the only one I gave. I think the Baltimore's plus 275, Red Sox plus 410, Tampa Bay just about 13-1, and Toronto about 20.5 to 1. So clear demarcation from the top three, really.
30-1 at DraftKings for the Jays, and if you're either Canadian or really like some of those moves that they've made, or a believer in Manoah and Scherzer bouncing back, that's certainly a great value play. Let's transition to the AL Central now, which, and as far as DraftKings is concerned, and since you surprised me with co-favorites, 3 of them in the NL East at Circa, wouldn't surprise me if we have 3 co-favorites or 4 even in the AL Central, where the Minnesota Twins are favored at DraftKings at plus 210, the Royals are at plus 270, the Tigers are at plus 270, and the Guardians are at plus 300. Obviously, the White Sox, a distant fade at plus 25,000. But the other 4 teams, a lot of reasons to think that they can break through. Last year, we saw the Tigers and Twins break through. And
the numbers are very close here. Plus 220 for Minnesota. They're the favorite, even though it's a plus price. The other 3, Guardians, Royals, and Tigers, are all plus 295. And then the White Sox 300 to 1.
Yeah, I mentioned the Tigers and Royals broke through in terms of being competitive last year. Obviously, the Guardians won the division and did so rather comfortably, finishing 92-69. They did not play an additional game because they didn't need to, but basically won over 90 games. We saw Stephen Vogt really blossom as the manager that nobody saw coming. Nobody expected what we got from him. We saw Emmanuel Clase emerge as the top reliever in the game, I think, certainly in the American League. They did so, had all that success with Shane Bieber having an early season injury, coming off another injury, and now he'll be back in the mix. So the hope is that the Guardians can build off last season, but certainly you can understand why a lot of people are optimistic that the Tigers, with their reigning Cy Young Award winner, and the Royals with Bobby Witt Jr. and a nice young talent base, can also take a step forward. And obviously Minnesota is going to be right there as well. So give me again, just to remind you, this is Andy Iskoe, logicalapproach.com. I'm Tony Mejia, and we're just talking about the off seasons for all these American League teams without really setting things in stone from a prediction standpoint, but an early look at the AL Central from you.
Well, I do like this Cleveland team. I like Beebe, who had some issues, some injury issues. McKenzie, who had that really nice season a couple of years ago.
Right.
I like him to bounce back also from injury.
They sent him down to the minors after a really nice start. There was something where Shaquille O'Neal and him bonded, and then he went, and then he went into the tank, and all of a sudden he was in the minors. So Shaq did not have a good influence on him. But yeah, Ben Lively.
Yeah, Ben
Ben
Lively,
Lively
and then
stepped up
you got an MVP candidate in Ramirez who can carry a team for stretches. So I'm
and
optimistic again in looking at these season win totals. And I don't know, did we go over all of them, or we're going to do them one by one? Maybe,
well,
you know what?
yeah, we'll go one by one on these. But yeah,
Okay.
we haven't even started on these teams,
Yeah.
but we'll start on with the Cleveland Guardians.
Guardians 82.5. I mean, it seems like it's a low
82
number,
and
but
a half. Is that what you got?
that's what it says here.
That surprises me a little bit
What do
because
you have it at?
again, they were a 92 win team last year, and I see at DraftKings they are at 82 and a half.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
and I think it's because of the depth of the division. You've got
true.
4 teams. No, I said what? 3 of them are at plus 295, and the others at plus 220. Yeah. So it could be. I'll tell you what an interesting prop would be for a book to put up. Will any team in the AL Central win more than 90 games?
Yeah, that would be good. And again, only the Guardians did last year for a reason to like them. Class A's back. They've got Paul Sewald from the Diamondbacks as a setup guy. If he finds his way again, very quality bullpen, and that was a bright spot for them last year. A reason that they won tight games. You got another year of David Fry and Kyle Manzardo with some experience under the belt. Brian Rocchio as well. I mean, Schneemann. These are guys that stepped up that were like, who are these guys? And they all stepped up. Will Brennan, Stephen Kwan at the top of the order. I think he's one of the better hitters in baseball for contact and getting on base. Jhonkensy Noel, he stepped up in the postseason, had some big home runs during the regular season. So there's a lot to like about the Guardians. Bo Naylor is going to be the catcher, probably the primary catcher, but brother Josh, he got separated going to the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, this is again a very solid team. Let's see what Carlos Santana. He's
obviously
his 35th year or something like that. Yeah, but he's still a contributor. There's everything to like about this Guardians team, but again, this is the one division of all the divisions that I'm going to need the most time to devote to as far as trying to pick an order of finish and a season win total, because there is, Kansas City, nice development. Detroit, nice development. Minnesota had a solid year. They were expected to perform well. They've also suffered a couple of key losses. So this is going to be the most difficult team for me to analyze over the next 4 weeks. The difficult division, rather.
And we'll talk about the Royals and Tigers in tandem because, again, both teams took massive steps forward last season. The biggest move, I think, for Kansas City in the offseason, they trade Brady Singer, who was one of their top 3 starters, certainly top 4, and add Jonathan India to a lineup that probably needed another catalyst in addition to Bobby Witt Jr. So that might work out. You're hoping that Vinny Pasquantino can take yet another step forward. Had some injury concerns, but really did become the hitter that he was expected to be as one of their top prospects. Certainly MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe were back. We'll see if who steps up in that other outfielder spot. Dyron Blanco was more of a pinch runner, speed guy. So, I mean, and Salvador Perez is back to be the anchor of that team as he has been.
And that's always a key. If you've got that caliber of a catcher, that's an advantage over most teams in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, and he's been so consistent. The one thing is he's now 34, so you wonder when that decline is going to come. But I mean, certainly
they're going to have to dish out his days alternating perhaps between catcher and DH. Very, very. They'll have to monitor that.
Very similar to Jose Ramirez and his influence as the leader of the Guardians, but even more so because he's so tightly interlinked with their pitching staff and handling them. And it certainly helped to have a veteran like Seth Lugo step up. And Michael Wacha as well. Can they avoid, a downgrade from really strong seasons last year? I think that's going to be a determining factor in whether this team can take another step forward. The Royals' win total at DraftKings is at 83.5, which is, I believe, less wins than they had last season. Last season, I'm looking at the NL. I know the Guardians won it with 92 wins. The Royals won 86 games last year, as did the Tigers. So they had identical 86 and 70.
I'll give you the numbers here. Guardians, I said 82.5. Royals, 82.5. Tigers, 83. Twins, 83.5. And where are all those good wins going to come from? The White Sox, 52.5.
Right. And then DraftKings has Minnesota at 84.5. We'll talk about them in a second because I want to talk Tigers first. But the Tigers are at 83.5, and the Royals are at 83.5. So very similar for two teams that won 86 games last year. And again, I think we like what the Royals have done, and certainly there's room for growth with that team, especially if Bobby Witt Jr. continues to be a monster.
Yeah.
But I think I like the Tigers slightly more. And maybe it comes down to those two teams fighting for a wild card spot.
Well, part of what I like about Kansas City, I like Michael Wacha, who's been a consistent pitcher, as has Seth Lugo been. Both the days
I think that's
Padres.
the key. Wacha and Lugo.
And they
Lugo
just gave Reagans a nice contract extension. So the top three of that Kansas City rotation, I think, is very good.
I want to see what the top of that order can do with India and Witt setting the table. I mean, those are two guys that if you get on base, you have to keep tabs on them on the base pass. So that always makes a big dent into what how distracting they can be against opposing pitchers. But the Tigers get Jack Flaherty back. I thought that was huge.
Yeah.
To have the Skubal and Flaherty 1-2. They've got some other talented arms there. We'll see if Casey Mize can take another step forward. Certainly they got Reese Olson, Alex Cobb is there. So you've got some veteran arms, you got some young arms. You don't expect Skubal, who's fantastic, to regress at any point. You had Jake Rogers emerge as a quality catcher, certainly handling that pitching staff and producing some big at-bats in terms of home runs. You added Gleyber Torres. We talked about his addition. And you got guys that I think will take a step forward at the plate in Riley Green and Matt Vierling, who the second half of the season were extremely good. Parker Meadows, same thing, a highly touted guy who's just figuring things out at the plate. Cole Keith, same thing. So this is a team with a high ceiling. They seem to like A.J. Hinch. They seem to respond to him. I like them a little more than the Royals. And when you look at two teams coming off 86 76 win seasons that Vegas has 83.5, 82.5 win total on, you might have to make a choice there.
Yeah, and as I said, this is a tough division. I like the addition of Gleyber Torres. We talked about him with the Yankees' loss of him, and I think he's going to be a nice veteran presence on a Detroit team that's learning how to win. After so many years of not having great success. I mean, last year was the first year that they'd been over 500 in quite a time, and even at 86, their win total this year, again because of the depth of the division, but how evenly spread out the division was last year, is still expected to be a little bit of a regression. That's one of these teams is going to end up being the major surprise, both on the positive side and on the negative side. It's just a question of which two of those four teams are going to be.
And I'll tell you what, I like them both better than Minnesota, who has a slightly higher win total, at least at DraftKings, at 84.5. I think if there's a fourth in this four co-favorite type thing that they have going on in the AL Central, it is Minnesota for me. Mentioned that they lost Max Kepler to the Philadelphia Phillies. They got Trevor Larnach, Matt Wallner back in that outfield with Byron Buxton. And Correa is back. I know the Yankees were looking at Correa.
And they lost the aforementioned Santana.
Right, exactly. And you got guys that you're counting on taking that step forward in Royce Lewis and Jose Miranda, who had some injury concerns last season. Certainly, if Royce Lewis can stay healthy, that is going to be huge for Minnesota, but he has not proven that he can stay healthy yet in his young career. Pitching wise, who do we got there? Chris Paddock, Louis Varland, Pablo Lopez. Yeah. And certainly you've got Joan Duran in that bullpen. Again, not a bad team, but I think 1 through 4, to me, it's Guardians, Tigers, Royals in any order, 1 through 3, and Minnesota for me is 4.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a little bit more of a look on that because there are some things. I mean, Byron Buxton when he's healthy is as a contributor as most teams could
Sure.
have. So let's see what happens with him. But there may not be enough around him to take advantage of that. Correa, proven veteran as well. So there is some talent on this team. But again, right now I'm looking at at those top 4 teams very, very close. So getting to see the first 3 weeks of spring training, I think will give some clues because there might be some players who make the roster that perhaps we're not even looking at right now. Some of these prospects on some of these teams.
Let's chat about the Chicago White Sox. Lowest win total projected 53.5 at DraftKings. And obviously 53.5 means you're hoping to avoid 110 losses, basically 109. So, yes, is that enticing? Sure. But let's remember that this is a 41 and 121 team last season, and they lost Garrett Crochet, their ace.
Right. And you're asking for basically a 25% improvement, which is a huge amount.
Right.
It's only like 10, 11 games.
You comfortable with that? With
no.
53.5? No.
I just can't play that. There will end up being better season totals to play than the Dodgers over, or even under, maybe, well, not so much, because again, the injuries could make a big difference. That's such an extreme. But I think it's easier to make a case for an extremely high number to stay under than it is for an extremely low number to go over.
I'll tell you what, this is a team that you have to watch in spring training because outside of Martin Perez, not a lot of recognizable names in that rotation to potentially be those starters. Nick Nastrini, but mostly really young guys that you want to keep an eye out for, certainly for fantasy team purposes, who's going to make up that rotation. Luis Robert is going to be the linchpin in the batting order. They've got Andrew Vaughn back, Andrew Benintendi, who, he's going to give you what he's going to give you. He's more of a singles doubles guy. But yeah, this is a bad baseball team that barely won 40 games last season and is now expected to win, 50 plus. I'm comfortable fading them, especially in a division where, yes, the AL Central isn't the NL East or the NL West, but a lot of quality teams there. It's going to be tough for them to get wins.
Well, the thing with the White Sox, and you make a good point that should be considered in playing under the total, is that any of their good players that they have likely gone at the end of July, or could well be done at the end of July, and we can see a strong fade from that team. But I still think they're a better. I will end up, I'm not going to play like 15 season win totals. Okay, that's just way too many. But right. I'd say I wouldn't be surprised if it's between half a dozen and a dozen. Maybe 1 or 2 per division, and the White Sox certainly. Now, of course, with the balance in this division, I'm not sure if I can find 1 or 2 to play to have a strong opinion. Although it's more likely I would find, because these teams are all in that 82.5 to 85 difference range, right, that I probably could find 2 teams that I would think that would go over that total, because I think they'd be the ones that would be competing for perhaps those 88 to 90 wins. But right. That's still a month away.
I wanted to see Ozzie Guillen back, and I like Ozzie Guillen, so thankfully for him, he is not the manager. New manager, though, Will Venable. He's been the bench coach for the Red Sox for the past few seasons. He is in line to try to get some improvement out of a very young roster that I don't see winning 50 games. Let's go to the AL West, which is a pretty talented division in terms of parity. We got the Houston Astros and Seattle Mariners, I think, are the 2 teams to beat. Mariners have a projected win total of 84.5, Astros 87.5. The Oakland A's, who you mentioned as a potential sleeper, are in the actually they're not the Oakland A's anymore. What are they now?
Well, Sacramento, I think. Is that where they're going to be playing? I think for 2 years.
Yeah, I don't see where they're at. Like, they're just the Athletics on.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm seeing so that the way they're being written. Yeah.
71.5. So yeah, it's the homeless Athletics are the team that's projected to bring up the rear in the AL West, which also houses the Los Angeles Angels, who have some roster turnover as well. In addition to again losing Anthony Rendon for the season, making him one of the worst signings of the last
Oh
quarter
boy, yeah.
century. So that's where we're at.
Let me see. Let me see what we have here for the win totals. For the Angels, we have 71.5. For the Astros, we have 86. For the Athletics, we have 72. And who am I missing here? The Mariners. We have Mariners and Rangers. Mariners, we have 85.5, and for the Rangers, 85. So it looks as though it's the Astros, Rangers, and Mariners, and then a huge drop off of a dozen or so games to the Angels and the Athletics.
And the Rangers.
By the way, Mike Trout, I guess, is now going to be a right fielder for the Angels.
Yeah, I mean, whatever keeps him in the lineup. But look, Texas, 2 years removed from a championship. Obviously, the bottom fell off last season for a number of reasons, injuries and a lack of production. Also, didn't deal well with the target on their backs, but mostly injuries. I think they anticipated the top of the rotation being much more prolific than it was. 78 and 84 for Texas in seeing the bottom fall out following a World Series win. And their projected win total is at 85.5. So certainly they're expected to be right there with the Astros and Mariners. And again, Houston, we mentioned, I think you said rebuilding. I said reloading. It's definitely interesting. Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman gone. It's a team that does return the heart of that squad in Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez, and we'll be looking to get production out of a rotation that's also significantly younger. You have Spencer Arrighetti, who stepped up last year, J.P. France. We'll see if Lance McCullers Jr. can stay healthy this year. And at the top of the rotation, Framber Valdez and Luis Garcia.
Yeah, I like Valdez. Tailed off a little bit after his strong start. Blanco wasn't nice. What do you have? Those no hitters last year with the
and Blanco too.
Yeah, Blanco. Yeah, Hunter Brown showed some nice things too.
Hunter Brown.
Yeah, maybe it. You could say that the Astros are reloading. I'm just wondering though, after I guess 86 for their win total is not that much different than what they've won actually the last few years,
right?
Where we 88 last year. So maybe if you're off by two wins, that's not really a significant reduction. It's just a question of how those young arms will perform. Will they continue to improve? Will they regress a little bit? Will they perhaps plateau a little bit? If we get the kind of production we had of last year, I think you still have to look at Houston as the team to beat in the division, but I don't think it'll be the runaway that we have seen for a number of years.
Right. And I mean, look, on paper, pretty talented infield, even though it's new look. You've got your old heads in Jeremy Pena and Jose Altuve up the middle, but at the corners, a new look with Christian Walker and Isaac Paredes.
Yeah.
So again, very productive in their former stops. Paredes, especially when he avoids strikeouts and avoids those prolonged slumps. But you got Yordan Alvarez, and then you've got an outfield. There's some names that you can hinge on in terms of being there for a few years with Houston, Chase McCormick, Jake Myers. But they're looking for Mauricio Dubon to take a step forward, and they've got some other names in there. Taylor Trammell, Kennedy Corona is a young kid that they're excited about. So we'll see. I mean, I think I agree with you. On paper, Houston is the team to beat. But certainly, Seattle can have a really strong performance because we know what we're going to get from them at the on the mound. It's been at the plate, and their lack of production, especially in clutch situations, that have really hurt. But as far as the rotation goes, a lot of really
might be the deepest in the American League.
You got
1 through 5.
Beyond Logan, Gilbert, and Castillo, you've got Brian Wu, who I love.
Yep.
You've got Emerson Hancock, who's really talented. Other Andres Munoz as one of the top relievers when he's on, getting stuff wise, and George Kirby in that rotation as well. So, I mean, yes, I agree with you in terms of depth. And they've added Randy Arozarena, did so last year, and hopefully with a full season, he can do what he was able to do in Tampa to take some pressure off Julio Rodriguez, who also regressed last season.
And Cal Raleigh gives him a nice little bat at the catcher position as well, which is something. What's that?
Big dumper.
Yeah.
That's his nickname.
Yeah. But no, I think right now, and again, we have a month to decide. Right now, I'm inclined to like Mariners over the Astros. A lot of roster turnover for the Astros the last few years. Yes, I am concerned about the offense, but I have to believe it's going to be improved over last year for the Mariners. And again, I like that starting rotation, a nice blend of youth. There's a decent experience in there as well. And right now, I give the Mariners the slightest of edges over the Astros, but too close to call right now.
And the Mariners are plus 250 to win the AL West at DraftKings. Rangers are plus 225, and the Astros are your favorite at $1.25 with the Angels.
All right, let me see what we have.
And the Athletics at plus 3,000.
At Circa, we have the Astros at plus 175, the Rangers at plus 205, Mariners at plus 210. Then there's a huge drop off to Oakland, to the Athletics at plus 28, roughly 28 to 1, and the Angels roughly 29.5 to 1.
Yep. And I mean, let's talk about the Rangers a little bit. Again, this is a team that was expected to have really talented starting pitching that just did not work out. Max Scherzer obviously gone and long gone. Jacob deGrom, though, is back, hoping to get through a season and rediscover his form. Once upon a time, the most dominant pitcher in baseball, and certainly the most talented. And you got the two Vanderbilt kids that a lot of people anticipated would be a force in big league baseball. It just hasn't happened for both Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter. So they're on this roster. Nathan Eovaldi, who has had a couple of nice seasons for this team. But yeah, a lot of question marks if you're the Texas Rangers on the mound. Offensively, I mean, they have Simeon and Seager back. With Adolis Garcia, Wyatt Langford, one of the more talented young hitters in baseball. They added Jock Peterson as well. So you figure that Bruce Bochy will have a lot to play with in the batting order, but on the mound, I think, is where the questions lie for the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, and with most of the teams in that division, it's always going to come down to pitching. Who is going to get the best pitching? I mean, I said before we agreed. Seattle's pretty nicely set, Houston pretty nicely set, and then it's the Rangers. Well, you really can't make a case for the Angels or the Athletics, so it probably comes down to the Rangers. And when I look at the overall roster, and I look at again, Jacob deGrom, he's barely pitched for them since leaving the Mets, and he's over 30 right now, and you wonder how much he's got left. Injuries are still a concern. John Gray, a veteran who's again had some issues. Don't know what to get out of the Rangers. I like the offense there, but pitching is I still place emphasis on starting pitching to the extent that the more you get out of your starting pitchers in, say, April, May, June, July, the fresher your bullpens are in August and September.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of reason for optimism unless we see that deGrom looks great in spring training and is on track to be that number one. You got Dane Dunning, who's done a nice job, but he's had injury issues. Tyler Mahley's on that team. He's had huge injury issues. Gray's probably on the downside of his career. So not a lot of optimism unless guys like Rocker and Leiter. And again, with pitchers, you got to get in a groove and you got to stay healthy. So big old X factor there. I'm far more comfortable with Seattle or Houston. Let's talk about the Athletics. And again, just to remind you guys, this is not our AL preview. This is more of an AL recap of the hot stove. Tony Mejia here with Andrew Iskoe. And we're going to talk about the A's in depth in a few weeks, but got to basically get attuned to Then playing in West Sacramento at something called Sutter Health Park. Got to see if that's a hitter's park or a pitcher's park and how that plays out. Really tough to handicap a team.
Have you checked the dimensions of that park compared to where they were playing in Oakland?
Well, I can give you them. Left field's 330, center is 403, right field is 325. So it seems like a smaller park. Obviously, foul territory was a big deal at the Coliseum.
Oakland, yeah.
The entire the entire setting was a big deal at the Coliseum in terms of having so many empty seats and opposing fan bases from that get to see their team in Oakland having free run of the park. I mean, obviously there were a lot of loyal A's fans, but few and far between, especially when it was announced that the team was moving. So it's a different dynamic for this team. Again, known as the Athletics, not the Sacramento Athletics, not the Las Vegas Athletics, just the Athletics this season. You get excited about the likes of Estuary Ruiz, who's back, Miguel Andujar, JJ Bleday, obviously Brent Rooker, one of the top home run hitters last year. So they've got some talent. Gio Urshela's on that squad, and they do have some starting pitching. JP Sears took a step forward last year, but hard to get excited about a team with so many question marks.
Yeah, this is a team that, again, you will be watching during the year to see who they're going to hold on to come the trade deadline. And hopefully for them, they'll have a couple of players that they want to be the nucleus of the organization, especially when they do get ready to move here to Vegas in a few years when the stadium is completed and generate some enthusiasm. But I don't think anyone's going to have great expectations for this team. We mentioned before what the season win total is for the Athletics at 72, and the Angels not much behind that at 71.5. And looking at what they've done the past few years, it's about 69 last year, so you're basically looking for a similar year this year. Now, the reason I might look a little bit over is because they did have moments late in the season where they actually started to play some pretty good baseball, knocked off a couple of the big teams in some key series. So maybe you've got that youthful enthusiasm which can build upon it. I'm not saying this team's going to challenge for, a 500 record, not at all. But I wouldn't be surprised if they can beat out the Angels and let me see, what were the Angels last year? I said Oakland, I think, was 69. The Angels were, I don't have it here.
I got it. But yeah, I mean, look, the Angels, I think there's more to get excited about with the Athletics than the Angels. The Angels finished 63 and 99 last season. Obviously, we've got.
So that was behind Oakland, yeah.
They added Yusei Kikuchi and Kyle Hendricks to this rotation. Yeah. There are some decent arms there, but I mean, just it's tough to. And certainly, if you were to have me choose between an Athletics win total to the over or the Angels, I'll take the Athletics because there is the possibility that the excitement of new surroundings. We'll see if there's any home field advantage to be had in Sacramento, or whether the locals are indifferent, knowing that they're not going to get to keep this team.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That you have to wonder how excited the fans will be. They may have a little bit of a
novelty. I mean, it's something to do.
Early on, it will be.
Kings fans are great. I mean, so and I've been to Sacramento. There's not much to do there outside of sports and government. So. We'll see. Again, I think my pick would be the Mariners in this division, but certainly the Astros, I view them more as reloading than rebuilding. We're going to wrap this up by just giving our thoughts again. We will have our opinions more formed after spring training sets in here in about a month's time. But again, I see the Yankees or Orioles winning the AL East. I like the Guardians, but really view the Tigers as my sleeper in the AL Central, and I'm going to give a nod to the Mariners in the AL West. But I think both you and I are in agreement, Andy, that the American League is wide open.
Yeah, I'd still make the Yankees the favorite. Like I say, I think I may end up being a little bit more optimistic about Toronto than I was earlier. I think I'm pretty much set with Tampa Bay being probably a 500 team. Not sure about the Red Sox right now. I'm more negative than positive. And Baltimore, Have they achieved as much as they can? I want to do a little bit more with. I think losing a guy like Corbin Burns, his experience, his ability may end up, plus some of the other key players that they lost. Central, that's the one I said I'm going to need the extra weeks because I could put a blanket over those top four and then come up with a different result depending upon the day and the time of the day that you asked me. In the West, yeah, Seattle and Houston, and I think because of the starting rotation and the fact that they'll be able to give, I think, more innings than perhaps Houston's rotation, I will prefer the Mariners. But that's all subject to change.
Yeah, and I think you and I are in agreement that probably need spring training and a broad scope of that to make more determinations on the American League than we do the National League. Once again, we appreciate you guys joining us for this AL preview. Make sure that you know that the NL Hot Stove recap is out there as well. We'll have baseball previews in the coming weeks. We'll probably be joined by our friends Mark Lawrence, Jim Feist, and Greg DePalma to break down what will be an exciting 2025 season. For Andrew Iskoe of the LogicalApproach.com, I'm Tony Mejia of PlaybookSports.com. Thanks for joining us. See you soon.
And that